بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم والصلاة والسلام على سيد الخلق أجمعين سيدنا محمد عليه أفضل الصلاة وأتم التسليم. We start in the name of Allah, the most gracious, the most merciful, and may His peace and blessings be upon our beloved Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Why does anything exist at all rather than nothing? It's a question that has echoed through the minds of philosophers, scientists, and ordinary people alike for centuries. When we pause to reflect on the universe, the stars, the trees, and our own lives, it's natural to wonder where all of this came from and why it exists in the first place. This deep sense of curiosity leads us to one of the most important and timeless inquiries: the search for an explanation behind existence itself. Before we dive into the argument itself, it's important to understand the different ways something can exist, because the contingency argument is built on this basic distinction. We can speak of three types of existence: contingent, impossible, and necessary. Let's briefly look at what each one of these mean. So contingent existence is a contingent thing is something that could exist or could not exist. Its existence depends on something else. So it's not necessary. It exists, but it didn't have to. So examples of this would be: you exist, but there was a time when you didn't. You came into existence because of your parents, and you depend on things like food, air, and water to stay alive. Also, a tree could grow or never grow. It depends on a seed, soil, water, and sunlight. A building exists because people built it, but it could have never been built. So all of these things do not exist on their own and could have failed to exist. They are not necessary to exist. So the second type, which is an impossible existence, an impossible thing is something that can never exist, not in this world and not in any world, because it involves a contradiction. So examples of this would be a squared circle. So it is logically impossible because a square must have 4 straight sides, and a circle has no straight sides. So combining these two into one shape contradicts itself. Another example would be a married bachelor. So it is impossible because the definition of a bachelor is an unmarried man, someone who's unmarried, an unmarried man. So someone cannot be unmarried and married at the same time. So these are not things that simply do not exist. They cannot exist because their definitions cancel themselves out. And the third type, which is a necessary existence, a necessary thing is something that must exist. Its non-existence is impossible. So it doesn't come into being and doesn't depend on anything else and cannot cease to exist. It exists by the very nature of what it is. So we are going to prove that the foundation of all existence must be a necessary being, and that this being is God. So why a necessary being must exist? Now that we have understood the three types of existence, the next step and that is to prove the existence of a necessary being. The first point is that contingent things require a necessary being. Everything we observe around us is contingent. Everything we observe, like the sun, the stars, the oceans, the animals, and even our own lives. None of these things had to exist. They came into being at some point and depend on other things for their existence. But if everything were contingent, we would be left asking, why does anything exist at all? A chain of dependent things still needs an explanation. The second point is that an infinite chain of contingent beings is impossible. If every contingent thing were caused by another contingent thing, we would end up in an infinite regress, an endless chain, an endless chain with no beginning. But this idea fails to answer the core question: why does the chain itself exist at all? So here is an analogy to make things simple. So imagine a row of dominoes. Each one falls because the one before it toppled it. So, but if the chain of falling dominoes went back forever with no first domino, then nothing would have ever start falling in the first place. So for any domino to fall, there must be a first cause, one that is not toppled by anything else. It must simply stand on its own and start the motion. In the same way, there must be something that doesn't rely on anything else to exist, a foundation that holds up all of contingent reality. So a necessary being must exist. To make sense of the existence of any contingent thing, there must exist something that is not contingent, a necessary being. This being exists by its very nature. By its very nature, it requires no cause and provides the ultimate explanation for why anything exists at all. Why anything exists at all. Without this necessary being, we are left with an endless series of why questions that never arrive at a satisfying answer for the origin of existence. Now, why this necessary being is God? Once we establish that a necessary being must exist, the next natural question is, what is it like? This being must have specific attributes that makes it fundamentally different from anything else. So the first attribute is oneness, because there can only be one necessary being. If there were more than one, they would have to differ somehow. But any difference would require an explanation, and that would make at least one of them contingent, not necessary. The second attribute is self sufficiency. A necessary being depends on nothing, and it is completely independent, uncreated, and therefore eternal. So the third attribute is causelessness. It is uncaused. Why is it uncaused? Because a cause would mean it began to exist, or it relies on something else for its existence, which contradicts its necessity. So it cannot be caused. The fourth attribute is uniqueness. Since everything else is contingent, this necessary being must be unlike anything else, because it's not contingent and everything else is contingent, so it's unique by definition. The fifth attribute is power. The necessary being must possess immense power because it brought everything else into existence. All contingent things depend on it for their existence. Creating such a vast and complex universe from non-existence requires unimaginable power. And since nothing else existed to assist or limit it, this power must be complete and unlimited. The sixth attribute is the attribute of will, because the necessary being exists by its nature, and it is not compelled by anything else. Its act of bringing other things into existence must be the result of will, not force. Think back to the domino analogy. The first hand that sets the dominoes in motion does so intentionally. It chooses to act. In the same way, the necessary being must have chosen to bring the universe to existence. This implies that it is not a blind force or a mechanical cause, but a being with a conscious intention. It decided to create rather than not to create. So these attributes of oneness, self sufficiency, independence, eternality, uniqueness, immense power, and will are exactly the qualities traditionally attributed to God. Therefore, reason leads us to the conclusion that the necessary being that grounds all of existence is none other than what we call God. Remarkably, this rational conclusion, aligns perfectly with the Islamic conception of God as described in the Quran, the Holy Quran. The attribute of oneness is described as, say He is Allah who is one. The self-sufficiency attribute, Allah, the sustainer of existence. He is needed by all, and he needs none of continued reality. So, and causelessness is described in the Quran as well. He has never had offspring, nor was he born. So he wasn't caused by something else. And fourth, the attribute of uniqueness, the Quran describes God as, and there is none comparable to him. So nothing else is like him because everything else is contingent. And he is the only necessary being. So he is unique by definition. The fourth attribute is power. The Quran describes Allah as, to Allah belong the dominion of the heavens and the earth, and Allah is capable of all things. So He has power over all contingent reality. The sixth attribute, which is will, Allah is described as, truly your Lord is the doer of whatever He wills. So God, Allah, can do whatever He wills. The striking coherence between reason and revelation indicates that the necessary being demonstrated by the contingency argument is none other than God, as described in Islam. So, all of these conclusions are rational conclusions and they agree with revelation. So, the description of God in Islamic scriptures, as primarily the Quran, which is the Holy Book of Islam, align perfectly with the rational attributes of God that we derived through the contingency argument and through reason. So, this is a remarkable agreement between reason and revelation.